During mid and late 19th century, excavations and auger drillings revealed info regarding the content of the money pit. Today, we have company prospectuses, witness reports in letters and articles to show this. Some letters and news articles from the 19th century and early 20th century tells about the stone with symbols being found in the pit during 1803 to 1805. These documents are scarce, but in some of them it is told that hundreds of people allegedly saw the inscribed stone when it was built into the fireplace at Smith's house. But we don't have any satisfactory first-hand source of the design of the symbols themselves. But we have a physical object, a piece of parchment which is said to have come from a chamber on the 153-foot level. This was unearthed by Blair and his men during auger drilling the summer of 1897. There are several documents that describe a stone with symbols, but only one claiming to depict the design of the symbols themselves. Here you see a timeline showing the whereabouts of the inscribed stone. The timeline is built on all the information available publicly today. For many years the stone was built into the fireplace at Smith's house, a small distance from the money pit. Letters and documents from the 19th century tell that Smith used to show the stone to island visitors. One letter claims hundreds of people saw the stone and its symbols. But altogether documentation is scarce, and we can at this stage of course not be 100% sure a real stone with symbols was ever found in the pit. It could have been a publicity stunt to attract investment capital to the excavations. This is a timeline showing all publicly known sources that describe an inscribed stone. These sources are not many, but the existence of a stone with symbols in relation to Smith's fireplace at least can be strongly suspected. Whether this stone actually came from the pit, we can't know at this stage. On the 28th of April 1949, a letter was sent from a Reverend A.T. Kempton to Mr. Blair. Around 1909, Mr. Kempton got in contact with an elderly school teacher in the town of Mahone Bay. The school teacher sent a letter to Mr. Kempton with the story of the Oak Island excavations, and also a handwritten drawing of the alleged stone symbols found in 1803 to 1805. The story of the excavation attempts at the money pit, as told by the teacher, was somewhat different than the usual story. Unknown details regarding discoveries on the platforms in the pit seem to have been added. Mr. Kempton attached the original letter from the school teacher in his letter to Blair. He also gave 2 hand-drawn sketches of the symbols on the stone. These 2 renderings show no major differences and make it possible to deduce a clearer sketch. The symbols seems to have space in between them at certain places, but this could of course have been added while drawing the symbols in the letter. A very simple substitution decipherment gives the famous message in English, 40 feet below 2 million pounds are buried. Interesting to notice is that the second triangle pointing downwards, the second F, seemed crossed out. It is unlikely this is a separate symbol, but should mean that the second F should be crossed, removed, or that it is in the wrong place. More on this later. Also interesting to notice is that 2 lowercase ff in succession was often used in 16th century English to mark a capital F. The level of coincidence needed for chance alone to arrange a set of symbols in this way can be illustrated by rolling an 18-sided dice, 1 side for each type of symbol, 40 times, 1 roll for each symbol in the sequence, and the result will be the sequence present. One can also calculate the chance by statistical math. The 18 types of symbols in the Kempton sequence can be arranged in 1.62 times 10 raised to the power of 50 ways in a sequence of 40. It is easy to see that it is unbelievable that this is a product of chance. Thus we can be almost 100% sure the Kempton sequence was designed with the English message in mind. The spelling seemed modern, but it was not uncommon in late 16th century to spell this way, even if English spelling wasn't standardized until mid-17th century. In 1971, a very important progress was made. Dr. Ross Wilhelm, a professor from Michigan, released his paper The Spanish in Nova Scotia during the 16th century, a hint to the Oak Island mystery. Dr. Willem had worked as a codebreaker during World War II and was a skilled cryptographer. In his paper he claimed that some of the symbols on the inscribed stone resembled those in the book De Furtivis Literarum Notis by Giambattista della Porta, published in Neapolis in 1563. This book was commonly seen as a Bible of cryptography in later part of the 16th century. Mr. Willem argued that the substitutive decipherment into 10 feet below 2 million pounds lay buried, as claimed by R.V. Harris to be an early decipherment before the Kempton letter surfaced, were not correct. For some reason Willem ignored or did not know of the decipherment in Mr. Kempton's own letter, 40 feet below 2 million pounds are buried. Willem also didn't notice, as he did not use the source letter, the second symbol, the cross triangle. Mr. Willem believed the symbols to be a polyalphabetic cipher code, as described in Porta's book from 1563. He therefore used a method for breaking these types of ciphers to figure out the design of the cipher disk and to retrieve the original message. Dr. Willem broke the cipher, he did not decipher it. I will explain the difference later. In the Porta book from 1563, different methods of coding and breaking ciphers are described in detail. Porta also depicts several coded messages as examples, using symbols of his own design. 7 of the symbols depicted are the same or very similar to the Kempton symbols. They are of a somewhat common design, but nevertheless similar. A large part of the book describes a polyalphabetic enciphering method that is developed by Porta based on the mid-15th century Alberti cipher. This new cipher method used an inner and an outer disk. Spaces on the inner disk have symbols and the outer stationary disk has letters. The encipherer turns the inner disk forwards or backwards a agreed number of steps and write down the symbol that is under the message letter. Instead of a disk, it is possible to use a table, a tabula recta. More on this later. Polyalphabetic ciphers are very hard to break, as they modulate the key alphabet position after each step, but it is not impossible. In his book, Porta describes a set of instructions on how to make use of the cipher wheel more securely, and make the resulting cipher withstand break attempts better. Porta suggests to use the following. Nulls, symbol with no value, should be inserted to mislead. Porta suggests to omit letters from the message to make it more obscure. The wheel with alphabet should be stationary and the wheel with symbols should be movable. Porta suggests not to use symbols for word dividing, as this was common use during 16th century cipher design. Word dividers would make it easier to break the cipher. The sections is taken from Latin professor Keith Preston's translation of the Porta book from 1916. Porta continues. First, place the wheel indicator on the letter A, or on another letter if known to the receiver. Sometimes omit ending letter of words if this letter is a vowel. The wheel can be moved several spaces each time as long as the rules are consistent. Incorrect spellings and order of letters in words are encouraged. By using rules Porta described in his book, which I have given, Dr. Wilhelm figured out the design of a cipher disk. He also figured out how many steps to move the inner disk after each symbol. Dr. Wilhelm found that the cipher could not be broken if not arithmetic dividing symbol was used as an actual word divider. This is the opposite of what Porta suggests and makes it significantly easier to break the cipher. Important to notice is also that only 2 nulls have been used. The crossed out triangle, which Dr. Wilhelm did not account for, and the encircled dot. All the rest of the symbols have a function or a meaning. This indicates strongly that the resulting message is intended by a codemaker. It would be easy to construct a much shorter message in a break attempt, defining most symbols as nulls, but this is not the case here. More on this later. To get the break result right, Dr. Wilhelm had to change one operating symbol of 3 dots into 2 operating symbols of 2 dots each. He also had to swap position of 2 letter symbols. Reading the result with the Spanish alphabet, Dr. Wilhelm arrived at Auquentia Guia Mia Rio Sumidero F, which means at 80 guide maze long narrow sea inlet drain F. I noticed that if one used the 16th century English alphabet to read the resulting message, and not the Spanish, then I and G, U and V work as the same letter. With this in mind, it is not needed to swap positions of any letter symbols. But we still need to change one operating symbol into two symbols of 2 dots each. On a stone fragment found on the surface of Oak Island in 1936, a symbol that could be interpreted as 2 dots plus another symbol of 2 dots can be seen. This stone fragment was once part of a larger stone located on the beach. It was dynamited sometimes during the 19th century. The other pieces seem to have been lost, but on the remaining fragment we also find other symbols. These symbols are recognized from cryptos further on in my main cryptographic discovery. It is possible that this stone was a keystone, placed on the beach to give clues. It could have included information on how to construct the cipher wheel, to be used with the inscribed stone symbols in the pit. If this is the case, then the false operating symbol in the polyalphabetic cipher could have been inserted in the symbol sequence on purpose. Such a change would make a break attempt harder. The false symbol could also be a product of hardship, creating a dual cipher. More on this later. So according to the Spanish message, maize should be put in long narrow sea inlet drains when we are at 80. 80 could refer to the depth in the money pit. At approximately this depth the inscribed stone was found. So what happens if we dig down to the inscribed stone and then solve the polyalphabetic cipher? We would take the message as instructions on how to stop the water traps. If we put huge amount of corn in the drains, the cave-in pit, the South Shore pit, and maybe also other drains, then we would be able to stop the inflow of water. Corn expands by water and will work as a plug. The last letter of the Spanish message is in F. We will see later that this most likely stands for Francis Bacon. But the rules Porter described seem somewhat arbitrary. One is free to choose any symbol as null symbol and any symbol as operating symbol of any value, and any misspelling and dropped letters can be inserted in the message. Dr. Willem did a break attempt with a successful result, but he did not decipher the symbols the intended way. It seems we could write any message and then define the meanings of the Kempton symbols so they fit the invented message. Let's investigate if this is as easy as it seems. To explain probabilities, a cipher maker could have created a disk and deciphered the message full in the Kempton symbol sequence, which then would have been filled with mostly nulls. But 4 letters are easy to construct in a break attempt, and the probabilities for this result being a product of coincidence or designed by a cipher breaker is quite high. So we cannot be sure it is a creation of a cipher maker or not. Thus it becomes uninteresting. What is interesting is to find a message that need many symbols in the sequence defined with fixed functions to work. Such a message have high probability being the intention of a cipher maker. In Dr. Willem's break attempt and my correction of it, only 2 symbols are nulls and 1 operating symbol is changed in the sequence. Thus 92% of the symbols have a defined meaning that is consistent throughout the decipherment. But to test Dr. Willem's break attempt, we could try create an alternative message that has the same rough probabilities as Willem's message, for being the product of a cipher breaker, or chance. If we can find this and make it work, then we can rightfully doubt Willem's message as being intended by a cipher maker. So, we create an alternative message with the same or more amount of letters as the Willem result, 28. We are allowed to exclude vowels from the alternative message before encipherment. We are also allowed to misspell words, but words cannot be changed so that they can be understood as other words. Now design a tabula recta. This table has the same cryptographic function as a cipher disk. Choose any European alphabet and place as many columns as there are letters in the alphabet. You are allowed to add 1 extra letter anywhere in the alphabet sequence, as Willem added a G to the Italian, so 1 extra column can be added. Write the letters in the alphabet in sequence in the cells like the table show. Shift 1 step up for each column from left to right. Actually, it doesn't matter if you scramble the alphabet, the probabilities will be the same. Now we will try to design a cipherdisk and rules to fit the invented message. Start at column number 1 or any column and check at which row the first letter appears. Then place the first symbol in the Kempton sequence at that row. Then move 1 or any number of columns to the right to define the next symbol. This standard non-operating symbol number of steps to move must be consistent throughout the decipherment. Check which row the next letter appears and place the next symbol at this row. Keep this method going throughout the sequence. Quite soon you will run into problems. In the chosen message you see here, the problems are introduced at the 7th symbol. As soon as you encounter a symbol for the second time, this symbol have already been defined as a letter symbol, an operating symbol, a null or a word divider in previous steps. Several different letter symbols can be placed on the same row, but the same symbol cannot be placed on several rows, as it will make the message undecipherable. Also, you can't change the definition of a symbol if you have defined it before. So what can we do? We are allowed to exchange an operating symbol to one or two others of our choice, one time. Willem did this with a false operating symbol. Other methods we can use is to back to the symbol before the repeated symbol and change the function of this symbol if we encounter it for the first time. If we are lucky, we can get a bit further down the Kempton sequence. We can also omit a vowel or misspell the message to be able to find the next message letter on the row of the repeated symbol we have already defined. But sooner or later we will either not be able to read the right row for the next message letter, as the symbol is defined on another already, or we reach the limit of misspelling the message, making words unreadable. There are only 5 symbols in the Kempton sequence that appear only one time. The rest of the symbols are repeated up to 5 times each. This is a major cause of trouble if we intend to find an alternative break attempt message. To sum up, we got a positive result in a polyalphabetic break attempt. Dr. Willem's message itself can be directly related to a stone with symbols in the pit, as it mentioned the number 80, drains and water channels. According to historic documents, a stone with symbols was found at 80 feet, though some sources say 90 feet. To create a believable alternative deciphering with the same level of probability, using the same historical method and type of rules Dr. Willem used, is more or less impossible, as symbols are repeated up to 5 times in the Kempton sequence. I believe I have shown this. Dr. Willem thought the cipher maker to be Spanish, which forced him to change a few symbols to get the message right in relation to the Spanish alphabet. But if one assumed the cipher maker used the English 16th century alphabet to write the message, but in the language of Spanish, then I is G and U is V. With this in mind, only one operating symbol needs to be changed to get it right. This is indication showing that Dr. Willem did not invent the message, but arrived at it. We have found that the correction of the false operating symbol seemed to be carved on a stone photographed in 1936, 2 dots plus 2 dots. This stone was originally located on the beach of Oak Island and could be a keystone, giving cryptographic clues. If checking for substitution, we find the message 40 feet below, etc., the probability for this being the product of coincidence is negligible. No other meaningful or grammatically satisfying sentence can be found while checking for substitution. I have used Decrypto, a software that uses several different algorithms to solve substitution ciphers. In the substitutive message, 2 Fs have been used in succession, with one of them crossed out. This indicates the late 16th century English creator, as 2FF was often used instead of a capital F. To conclude our analysis, in our investigation of the Kempton symbol sequence, we understand that the symbols themselves can never prove if they really came from an inscribed stone in the money pit. But we have found that the symbols can in fact give us strong indications that this is the case. We have come to this conclusion by finding 2 different messages using 2 different historically confirmed cipher methods. It seems more or less impossible to get any other message from the Kempton sequence of symbols, checking the above methods. Also, during late 16th century there were not many methods around to encipher messages that resulted in a set of symbols. The methods available were substitution and the polyalphabetic systems. So we got two different messages in two different languages using two different cipher methods. Normally, this would make us doubt one of the decipherments to be intended. But during our investigation, we have found very strong indications that both of them are intended. So we have a very interesting and very unusual situation. If the Kempton sequence is indeed a dual cipher, and the sequence in fact depicts symbols found in the pit, then this would explain a lot of things. Dual ciphers are very hard to create, but there are systems that can be used to create them. In the Kempton sequence, the operating symbols have been used as fillers to fill out the letter difference between the English and the Spanish message. I believe the false operating symbol to be a product of creating this dual cipher, as it is hard to get it all 100% correct. As we will see later during this lecture, there is a very understandable reason for placing a dual cipher on a stone in the pit. The simpler English substitutive decipherment would work as a decoy message. The English message also have other functions. A decipherer of the wrong kind would think he had deciphered the symbols completely with a simpler method, and he would therefore not look for a second message. The simple message 40 feet below, etc., would also work as a way to activate the true function of the money pit, the deep folly. After seeing this message, the ignorant seeker would immediately think there is something valuable in the pit, and would keep trying to get further down, activating the water traps. Without this simple message, the pit could be mistaken for a weapons storage facility, a mine, or anything else less interesting than a treasure keep. One can say the English message is the thing that activates the island beacon. Here it is appropriate to quote Daniel Mögling, 1618, from the Mirror of the Wisdom of the Rosicrucians. What shall it avail thee if thou comes with unwashed hands and a mind desirous of money? Little can the ringing of the bell or the blowing of the horn help thee, and even though thou seest the gates open before thee, thou must not enter. For thy name stands not written there, for thus it is written, Come ye who are worthy. The Spanish message, encrypted with a much more advanced cipher, gives instructions on how to stop the water traps. The intended way of deciphering this message was dependent on information a seeker would need to take with him to the island. I have in a later section of my main discovery, which I will give during another lecture, found instructions on how to construct the outer disk of the cipher wheel to use. The Italian alphabet plus a double I, which is the same thing as adding a G in the English alphabet. I believe the stone photographed on the surface in 1936, before it was split into pieces, also held clues on how to construct the cipher wheel or tabula recta.